umpires in 2002. Daryl's first appearance in international cricket was in 1994 in a one-day international in Perth between New Zealand and South Africa. In November 1998, Daryl made his test debut in the second Ashes test at the Bucknor. He umpired in the 2003 and 2007 World Cups. As you can imagine, with millions of eyes watching every decision a cricket umpire makes in the field, there's no wonder that there's intense pressure on the man that stands out in the middle of the cricket field for every session, every day, of what should be a 5-day test match. An interesting statistic which I gathered, in mid-2011, prior to Daryl's retirement, over a 2-year period, he was the most accurate decision maker in Test cricket, with a 94.5% accuracy rate. Didn't know that it's statistics at this stage. But that accuracy rate, interesting enough, in Indian Test matches increased to 96.2. Daryl retired in somewhat controversial circumstances in 2011 after he officiated in 95 Test matches, 174 one-day internationals. Both Australian records, and third in cricket history behind Steve Bucknor and Rudi. Daryl was a Crows ambassador, having been resigned in 2008, and I've learned today that the tie Daryl's wearing is the Crows ambassador tie. He's also a very proud and loyal football club supporter, and he claims to be the #1 paid tip holder. I have to say, emphasise the word paid. We look forward to hearing Daryl's address today. The club, and particularly given that he has made some very interesting comments in the press of recent times as to what he thinks about the Indian team and their position in the world cricket today. Would you please welcome Daryl Harper, retired ICC.
Mr. President, Koertzenians, guests, and Rob, thanks very much for the introduction. Yes, a local boy. I didn't know that I was going to be a cricket umpire and get to travel the world like I did. I used to come along here and watch the footy and the cricket back in the 60s. First day of the test match, we had our scorebook out, ABC scorebook, and we'd be recording every run scored. But by the second session, I think we'd be collecting empty drink bottles, and we could pay our way back in the next day. I wasn't privileged. I didn't get to come into this members area like you people did. I was in the outer. I used to have to sneak in one of the back gates if I could, and managed to do that a few times, and remember seeing Les Fabel and lots of Sheffield Shield cricket. So, my memories of Adelaide Oval are great. It's lovely to be here. I think I've got my business card up there behind me. That was my philosophy. Every dog has his day. On that occasion I was avoiding a snarling dog somewhere in Sri Lanka. I think it was in Kandy. And yes, I managed to get out of the way, but I couldn't miss out on using that photo. As I've been lucky enough to travel about the world, that little adage of every dog has his day has come into use. And if I can get this little machine to turn over to the next page.
Rob, I forgot to tell you to turn it on.
I'm going to pause there for a moment because I want to apologise here, Rob, because a story against the South African. Those of you that are struggling with the technology like I just was, don't feel bad about it. For 6.5 years, Mike Proctor, a wonderful all-round cricketer, travelled the world as an ICC referee. And do you know, even after 6.5 years, he hadn't mastered the art of pressing the save button. So most of the forms that he sent into the ICC about umpires' performances were the blank originals that he was provided with. 6.5 years, good old Mike, he just never got that right. Okay, here we go. There we are. That's been picked up on a number of places. That was a hotel, I think, in Kolkata, where they provided me with a birthday cake with my saying on it. Now, not only every dog, but I think Glenn McGrath might have had his day around about 10 or 11 years ago when India was playing here, and I'm sure some of you were in the crowd when Sachin decided to duck under a bouncer. Didn't quite get the bounce that he thought it was going to, and a young umpire doing his 4th or 5th test match gave him out LBW, and that young umpire has recently challenged Channel 9 to replay that dismissal when the test's in Adelaide next week. I'd like them to use their modern technology to try and superimpose over the top of the original footage, because I still reckon he was out. And to Sachin's credit, he never complained about that. He was the captain at the time. India were 3 for 27 when he walked in the second innings. I think they only needed 395 to win. and after 3 balls they were 4 for 27, he was on his way. I copped a lot of abuse. I remember Les Fabel's wife saying to me as I walked out of the ground, "Daryl, we came here to watch Dorker, not you." And one thing it did guarantee was that as of that moment, 1/6 of the world's population knew my name. Sachin did forgive me, obviously. That's a test match in India at a later date, so we were still on talking terms, and we were still on good friendly terms the last time I saw him, but we'll see what happens if we bump into him in Adelaide next week. If I can just go back to 2011, it was a big year for me. Lots of things happened. I started in New Zealand with some tests with Pakistan. I went to the World Cup in the subcontinent in February and March. In May I was home here in Torrens Park reading on the internet that I'd been sacked. I thought that was a pretty toppy way of the ICC to inform me that I wasn't getting a contract. David Richardson rang me 4 or 5 hours later to try and break the news, but I was able to respond appropriately. He did say that they had a lot of confidence in me to go and finish 2 more test matches that I'd been appointed to, and I went and did one. I believe I copped some unfair criticism, and I didn't really feel like going back to my final test. It would have been my 96th. With a cloud over the game, I didn't want it to be a contest between India and the Indian media and myself. Cricket deserved a little bit more than that, so I turned around and came home. As it happened, on the last night of my 95th test match, my son and his wife had their first child, so I also became a grandfather last year. So well done, Max. This is my first. I bet you've got a few more up your sleeve ahead of me. So I retired in July, and later in the year I turned 60 and had my 39th wedding anniversary. And I suppose I've been telling people middle age start to set in. It is middle, isn't it, when you get to 60? That's what I was told. My focus today, of course, in the short time I'm here, is obviously India, because we've got the Indians touring. I don't want anyone to think that I've got any animosity at all towards India or the players. I have not a shred of a problem with any of them. I love touring India. I think I probably went there 10 or 12 times. I had a lot of fun there. I was a great tourist there. I saw a lot of cricket. I think I umpired 8 tests and about 15 one-day internationals there. I went to the IPL the first 3 years, and the first 2 years were held in India. My time in India was brilliant. I really loved touring India. I remember saying to my wife when I'd umpired 1 or 2 tests, if I can get to India and survive as an umpire, I'll be able to call myself an umpire, because I acknowledged even then that they were the toughest conditions that you could possibly come across around the world for umpires. I remember my first test was in a place called Kanpur, and on the first day of my first test match in India, New Zealand playing, there were 4 fieldsmen gathered, probably within 1.5 meters of the batsman. I walked off at the end of the day. I was absolutely bush. I said to my colleague, "This is not the sport I've been umpiring in Australia. This is totally different." The pitch was all powdery, no grass at all. There was a horrible smell from the abattoirs next door, just drifting across the ground in the afternoon. I didn't have great memories of that particular game. However, that was my introduction to India, and to be honest, I loved every trip I went on, and I certainly value all those moments. Now, when I've been travelling over the years, I've always managed to take a few touches of home, and one of them has always been my Crows footy. Now, Brenda Saywag might not be getting many runs, so I've got a little suggestion to him when I see him. The Crows could do with someone coming off the bench that can make an impact just for a short period of time. And I've got him all dressed up in my Crows Guernsey. He's got the footy on his hand. He didn't have the faintest idea what he was going to do next. So I just took the photo and retrieved my gear. But that's the sort of nonsense that I enjoyed when I was overseas, especially travelling with the Indians. There was always a huge media contingent, constantly people asking for stories, asking for quotations. I've had another one this morning while I've been out having a hit of golf. They just keep coming. Someone's asking me, am I going to meet the players? Do I have any intentions to speak to Dhoni? People are desperate for a comment, and the media circus over there is quite phenomenal. The number of touring journalists and photographers is quite stunning. Another player that's just been recalled for the one-day series is Irfan Pathan. He'll be here again shortly. Lovely young lad. At one stage he kept asking me if my daughter was still single. I haven't seen him for a while, although she is still single. If I see him, I'll be telling him, because those boys have got plenty of money in the pockets, those Indian cricketers. Probably one of my favourite memories of India probably was a different sort of test match actually, or a different sort of test. It was actually what you'd call a screen test. I was sitting at Footy Park watching the Crows annihilate Port Power a few years ago by 5 points, and I got a phone call from a guy in India. He wanted me to come on the Sunday. He wanted me to be there by Tuesday night for 3 nights shooting for a movie. So yes, I flew all the way to Jaipur for 3 nights. The condition was that they could get me back to Launceston by the following Sunday, because my wife and I were going down to visit Rellies and go to the footy and see the Crows get annihilated by Buddy Franklin, unfortunately. That's a fellow actor, a guy that came from country New South Wales. Fellow actor. Let's take a look at him. He's an actor. There's some guy from country New South Wales living in Mumbai. He just fronts up quite often at a particular site, and because he's a Caucasian, he often gets a job as a lawyer, a doctor, a businessman in lots of Bollywood movies. So yes, that was Glenn, and not to be far away from the footy, Brett Lee was one of the team in the movie. Brett had the job of providing an Australian team. He needed 5 or 6 players to make up the numbers for close-up shots. So Brett brought along his former brother-in-law. He brought along, the guy in the background was his primary school friend with his tongue out. They were still mates. He brought along someone that he trained with in the gym in Sydney, and someone from his band that played the guitar. And all these guys were dressed up in Australian gear, running around with Ponting and Clark on their back, as we proceeded to film a movie called Victory. Could I have a show of hands, all those people that had actually seen the movie? Okay. I think I'm the only one. I do have 5 copies. They cost me $1 each. I bought them in Bangladesh, and it's a shocking movie. Brad Hogg is another one that fronted up for that movie, and Brad's a Dockers man, so I won't tell you what he told me to do with my football. But between takes, we were doing a bit of circle work with the footy. We did attempt to get the footy next to the helmet behind the keeper, in an attempt to get the Crows footy into the movie, but they just wouldn't fall for it. Now, you've got to remember, I'm only an umpire, so I'm not a media expert, I'm not a cricket expert, like most of you, I love the game. The only reason I've had so much experience is because I just happened to be foolish enough to try umpiring, and it seemed to work out for me. For the last 10 years of my life, I've been spending about 8.5 to 9 months overseas. Missed a lot of footy. I'm not going to miss much more now because my time is over. But looking at this touring India team, I think I need to make a couple of observations because I've been up close. In my era, since I first umpired my first test at the end of '98, India's actually won 29 test matches at home out of 63 tests. Okay, so that's not a bad strike rate. They won 46% of their games at home. Now, they could have inflated that a little bit if they'd allowed Bangladesh to play a test match in India, but of course, Bangladesh isn't going to pull a crowd, and Bangladesh isn't going to sell big TV rights. So the only place Bangladesh has played India is in Bangladesh, and that's been reluctantly. So if India had played Bangladesh, they might have pushed that success rate at home up to 50%. Now in the same period, on the road, they've only won 24 tests from 78 attempts. So they've gone from 46% down to 30%. If you then go a little bit further and you take the subcontinent out of the equation, because Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, I mean it's home territory really, when you realise that the people in Kolkata are speaking exactly the same language as the people in Dhaka, it just happens to be a borderline between them. They're all Bengalis. It's pretty much a home ground advantage. So if you take out the subcontinent and you take out Zimbabwe, because I'm sorry, but they still really don't quite count when it comes to the maths, then India's had 10 wins from 51 test matches, so they're down to 19% of their wins. 19% of games on the road they win. In Australia, that comes down to 14%. They've had 2 wins out of 14 tests from 4 tours while I've been an umpire. In the last 7 tests, they've lost a lot. They lost 4 to England and they lost 3 to Australia so far. Last 13 tests on the road, they've only had 2 wins. So we really shouldn't be quite shocked at the way the tests have been panning out. Now, I have a bit of sympathy for VVS Laxman because he's kind of in the same position I was in recently. He's been around for a while. Back in 2008, I remember writing down that he told me that this was the tour that a number of the boys were actually aiming to play. Tendulkar, Dravid, himself, maybe even Sewang. They were looking at the Australian tour. They wanted to come here in 2011-12, win the series and then retire. Well, like me, VVS Laxman's retirement might be out of his hands. He might not get to call the tune. He might be on his way pretty shortly. If I can also quite clarify that those issues, I have a couple of issues with India, and one I think you'll be very, very disturbed about. I certainly hope you are. And I'll preface these issues by saying that in the last 4 years, I umpired India 10 times home and away, and the official ICC records, although you're probably thinking they're pretty dubious, if Mike Proctor couldn't turn his computer on, and other people have patched those stats up for him. In those 10 test matches in 4 years with India, I made 5 decisions that actually counted against India. So 5 decisions they could have been disappointed with. So one of those, I made 1 error every 2 games with India. I did seem to perform very well when they were playing. I don't know whether it was because of the intensity and the scrutiny that I was under, and knowing how many people were watching. 1/6 of the world's population were interested in whether they were winning or losing, but I seemed to perform quite well under that pressure. I can't translate that on the golf course though. I can't play well under any pressure there. I'm even under pressure, even no pressure I can't play. Anyway, so I enjoyed my time with India, but I do have a couple of issues. In the last test match, I had a couple of moments with MS Dhoni, and one of them came after medium pace bowler Praveen Kumar proceeded to run down the middle of the pitch, and so running into what we call the protected area, 2 feet wide, it's 5 feet down in front of the popping crease, and with India batting third and the West Indies about to bowl last, it meant that any damage he did was going to be an advantage to his attack. So it's something we scrutinise fairly closely, but I must admit a lot of umpires, I don't want to be harsh on some of the other lads, a lot of the other boys are good at giving the warnings, but they're not all that good at finishing off the deal. And so people like Praveen Kumar have actually been getting away with this for some time. So after the warnings, after the first caution, the final caution, I then explained to MS Dhoni that that bowler was out of the attack, could not bowl again in that innings. And I remember MS was he was a bit shocked. He said, "But he's playing his first Test match. You should have been more lenient. He's a young boy." Well, I've discovered that he's actually played 52 one-day internationals for India. In the 4 one-days before the Test match, he was warned in every game. Got the first warning, but no one actually carried it through. And I said to MS, "Look, I'm sorry, mate. This is not actually a warm-up for anything higher. This is about the highest level we play at. I can't go lenient on someone if it's their first Test match or their last." I had another moment when one of the close infieldsmen claimed a bat catch and charged at my colleague Ian Gould and ran about 15 metres. I reminded MS that we talked about the excessive appealing before. The West Indies had asked us to be vigilant, and that's what I was trying to be. And MS turned to me and said, "We've had issues with you before, Daryl." Now, I was foolish enough to tell my golfing mates that, so every blessed round of golf I play, I hear that line thrown back to me. "We've had issues with you before, Daryl." I should say that India have actually played 461 Test matches since they entered the Test competition in 1932, and only 2 bowlers have been removed from the attack in those 461 Tests. And I remember who the other one was because it was Ashish Nair in Bulawayo, and he did exactly the same thing 12 years ago, and I was the umpire on that occasion too. So I can understand MS having some issues. I must tell you a sad story, really. I'm thinking about going to the anti-corruption people with this one. Now that I've retired, I can come clean with this. Harbhajan Singh. I'm sorry, but Harbhajan Singh owes me $80. I was umpiring him in Sri Lanka. I commented on the daggy hat I was holding for him. To cut the story short, he asked me to get him some. I said, yes, I can organise that. I've got a friend, I've got Steve Davis to take me to him in India. The deal was he'd pay me when he saw me next. Well, when he saw me next, it turned out to be my last test match. And wouldn't you know it, in that test match, I missed a no ball, okay, one error, and I also gave a very poor LBW decision. Not like the Sachin Tendulkar one, that was spot on. This one was Harbhajan Singh batting, and the ball clipped him on the pad, just above the knee roll. Ball guy had it going a couple of millimetres over the middle stump, not touching the woodwork. No DRS, so no recall. When Harbhajan Singh was bowling on about day 3, he had a big appeal turned down against Shivnarine Chanderpaul. And he said, why not? And I said, I think it was going over the top of the stumps. As he walked past me, he said, that didn't worry you when I batted. Now, I could have left it at that. I could have left that. I always wanted to have the last word. So I walked back to him at his mark and I said, Harbhajan, there's only one reason why I gave you out the other day. It had nothing to do with the fact that you owe me $80 and you haven't even brought it up. This is in the middle of an over in a test match. I said, I didn't even consider that. I just made a crappy decision. You know, you get a few go for you. You have a few against you. Bad luck about that one. He put his hand out. He wasn't looking me in the eye. He was looking straight at the ground. Put his hand out. Shook my hand. I turned around, got back into position. We finished the over. We finished the test match. And the bugger still hasn't paid me. Okay, I'm getting the wind up here. Rob, it's time for you to come and take over and perhaps could I answer a question or two? Is that possible? Okay, let's call it quits there.
That's the eye. 3 more minutes of questions.
Daryl, as a fan of cricket, it always amazes me how you guys maintain your concentration. Is that just an attribute you've got to have, or is there something you use to sharpen that attribute, or how does it work?
Yeah, there is. It's called the fear of failure. The fear of getting shown up. No, it's a matter of just concentrating for a few seconds at a time when the bowler comes charging past you. You get plenty of time to switch off. And I was told in my early days out here that I talk too much to the fieldsman, but I mean, that's half the fun of it. No, I don't think there's any secret knack about it. It's just a matter of focusing for those few moments at the right time and hopefully making the right guess.
Yes.
Thank you, Rob. Daryl, I've always been intrigued with what you have to do as an umpire. For instance, looking at the no ball, then being quick enough for the fast bowler to know where it's landed and which way it's moving or swinging as well. What's the secret to that?
Same again. Fear of failure. Fear of having it replayed on the screen that you missed a no ball, and I did miss a no ball in that last test match. It's just a matter of habit, I think. It's just you get yourself into a routine. It's like any activity you do, any sport. You go through your routine before every delivery. If it's someone like Brett Lee, we might stand a metre back, which gives us less of an angle to move our eyes from looking at his foot on the popping crease because he's always there to lifting them. And other bowlers, you can stand a little bit closer. So it's just a matter of having a habit and sticking to it, and we get most of the right. Although it's interesting now the boys can double check. We've had a few umpires doubt themselves when a dismissal's fallen recently. They've gone to the third umpire for the check, and some of them have been quite comfortably legal deliveries by 6 inches. So, I think what's happening with the technology is perhaps we're being a little bit de-skilled, where we're not as sharp as we used to be because we don't have to be. We've got an out.
Chris?
Thank you, Daryl, for a wonderful address. I've got 2 quick questions about the DRS. First of all, I assume that the umpiring panel actually is in favour of it.
Generally, yes. Yep.
And secondly, we hear around the traps that the Indians' resistance or refusal actually to use it is to do with their predilection for intimidation of umpires. Do you believe that's the case?
Well, I think there might be a little bit of truth in that, but I think it probably comes back to the very first time it was used in about 2008. They went to Sri Lanka. It was used as a trial, and they just didn't get any of their calls or their reviews right. They went the wrong way every time. Sri Lanka used it beautifully, and there wasn't a hassle. There's something about that intimidation factor, no doubt about that. None of the players are exempt from that. They do love to appeal. I remember looking on, actually I introduced my son to Narendra Hawani at the Boxing Day test. Hawani took 16 wickets on debut and then came and played here in the Youth World Cup. And I said to Tim, this man took 16 wickets in his first test, and quite a lot of them were out, weren't they? In those days I was home umpire. I'm not quite sure what percentage were actually right.
We could be here all day, obviously, but we don't have the time. So we've been treated to a very great presentation, I feel, as to an insight of an international elite umpire, and we certainly wish you well in your retirement. And once again, thanks very much for coming, and on behalf of the Rotary Club of Adelaide, please accept this small token.
To learn more about Rotary, check out our website at the web address below.